References and sources. This video will explain what referencing is, when to use it, and what's a good source for academic writing. So what is referencing? Well, referencing, also known as citation, is a standard academic practice in academic writing that involves acknowledging the sources of information you have used in your work. Referencing serves several important purposes. It gives credit. So it acknowledges the original authors whose work has contributed to your understanding and supports your arguments. This is a matter of academic integrity and intellectual honesty, which brings us on to avoiding plagiarism. Plagiarism is presenting someone else's work, ideas, or words as your own without proper attribution. It is a serious matter that could get you kicked off your university course. And referencing helps you avoid plagiarism by clearly indicating which parts of your work are based on the ideas or words of others. What do we actually mean when we talk about referencing? Well, when we're talking about referencing, we are talking about two different things. We're talking about the formatting of how you record the reference in your work. But we're also talking about the source, and I would argue that the source is more important because the source is where you got your information from. And at undergraduate level, you need to be going away, reading a lot around the topic you're writing about, and then using that information that you've read to help form your own argument and your own points in your academic word. So we're going to talk about formatting and sources separately, and we'll start with what formatting means first. So here we've got an example of a formatted reference. This is an example from a journal in Harvard style. And you can see we've got all of the information about the source, what we would need if we wanted to go away and find the reference to read ourselves. We've got the names of the authors, the name of the article, when it was published, and the journal it was published in. You're going to find specific guidance on what information to include in references in your library resources. Different universities and different programs have different requirements, so you will need to carefully consider this. This is very much a case of learning a formula, making sure you record your sources as you go along, and ensuring that you use your university style guide. It's laborious, but it doesn't take too much brain space. You will also need to ensure that you keep a record of all the sources used in your piece of writing, and you'll then need to record them in a reference list. This should always be presented at the end of your work, and it must almost always contain a reference list. And here's an example. It may be that you're required to put it in alphabetical order, and do make sure there aren't any missing references. And finally, the last piece of formatting I want to go over is that you will also need what are called in-text references, otherwise known as citations. And these are the points in the text where you are indicating your writing has a source attached to it. And here we've got two ways in which we can format it. For this first in-text citation, we've got the citation at the end of the sentence, and it's in brackets with the author's last name and the date, separated by a comma. This shows where I got the information here in this sentence about the Midwives Act. And then the second example shows us a way that we can have a citation which is within the sentence, and this is very useful if you want to refer to a report or the name of the author of that citation. So we can see here we're using the Ockenden report as our reference, and we've got the name used in the sentence, so just the date is in brackets. And to elevate your work to the next level, I would be expecting you to use both of these in your work. And just remember that for the in-text citation, you should have up to 3 of the author's names, the year of publication, but no other information such as links or first initials. So that covers the formatting. You will need to go away and read a bit more about formatting. You will need to practice it. It's a skill that you gain. So we'll talk now about sources. So to some extent, formulating reference is easy. It's time consuming, but you learn the formula. However, choosing a source to be your reference takes some thought and time, because this is where you need to start reading a wide range of material to see what can be used to support the points and arguments in your piece of writing. This is where you need to take your time and consider these carefully. When you're writing an assessment, you need to give yourself more time than you think to read, and you should also really start reading before you start writing, although I know we're all keen to get stuck in and start on that introduction so we can feel like we've got it done. So how do we decide what makes a good source? Well, here are some general rules that you can use. So your university library is a treasure trove of academic resources. It provides access to many of the sources you will need, including journal articles, books. It may also contain links to government websites, reports, policies, and guidelines. So journal articles are what you should primarily be using to back up the points you make in your academic work. They contain up-to-date information and primary or secondary research from experts. Books can also be good sources if they are published and you are looking to find out about a theory that supports what you are discussing. Government websites can provide official statistics, reports and publications that can be really reliable, especially in healthcare. And policies and guidelines, for example from NICE, WHO, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, are really important resources for healthcare students. Sources to use with caution. Patient and public information leaflets. So these are not aimed at students and are not at a suitable academic level for you to reference. However, you might want to reference them to demonstrate what is available to the public, in which case you could use them as a source. Websites. Be really cautious when using information from websites that lack references or a date of publication. Websites are really about marketing rather than accuracy, so avoid referencing them even if they seem academic or aimed at people studying, such as something like StudyHub or Scribr. And finally, newspapers and media sources. So news websites are not necessarily known for their academic rigour, and they may not provide in-depth information, or it could be really biased. Think about the Daily Mail as an example. However, you might want to reference them to demonstrate what has been said on the topic in the news, and so that would be acceptable. And what should you avoid? And I would not recommend using these as sources. So firstly, Wikipedia. Wikipedia gives a good general overview of a topic, but it's not a reliable academic source. It could be edited by anybody, and it may not be accurate. Instead, use Wikipedia to find references from better sources or as a starting point for your own understanding. Blogs. So information from personal blogs and websites should not be referenced. It will lack rigorous review process. And finally, social media. Information shared on social media platforms is unlikely to be peer-reviewed and fact-checked, and it is a little bit of a red flag to the lecturer reading your work that you maybe haven't done very in-depth research. Timeframes. So it's very important when you are using sources that they are up to date. And in general, you should look for sources published in the last 5 years, especially if you are looking at research published in journals, because you want things that are up to date. Generally, we prioritise recent research, but older research may still be valuable for establishing concepts. And sometimes this is called seminal work, which refers to highly influential and groundbreaking contributions in study. These works are often really innovative, but also very well known, so it can be good to reference them to show you understand the literature. Some other potential exceptions include older books which explain theory, which may be well established and unlikely to change. For example, sources on anatomy and physiology don't need to be so up to date. And of course, if you're referring to something that happened in the past, for example, a law like the Mental Health Act, this would be appropriate. What makes a good source? So you must consider the quality of the information you're reading, and here are some key questions to ask yourself. So, who wrote it? Check the qualifications of the author. Do they have academic credentials and relevant experience? For example, do they hold a master's or a PhD? If they're looking at women's health, are they gynecologists or specialist nurses? Consider where it was published. Peer-reviewed journals from academic publishers are generally considered to be more credible. Consider, is it peer-reviewed? So peer review is like a quality control for academic research. When a researcher writes a paper and submits it to a scientific journal, the editor sends it out to other experts in the same field, their peers. These experts carefully read and evaluate the paper, looking at the quality and reliability of the information. So peer review is a marker of good quality information. Ask yourself, is it biased? Do you think this author is biased? If, for example, it's a study on skincare for newborn babies and it's published by a skincare producer, is probably quite biased, so watch out for underlying agendas. Consider the intended audience. Is it a general audience? Is it a more academic reference or source? And as a university student, you have to steer yourself towards sources that are more academic. So by using these questions, you can critically evaluate the source, and you'll be better equipped to select high-quality academic material. When should you reference? So references need to be throughout your work. If you have a paragraph without a citation, this could really be a red flag that you don't have enough sources in your work. Generally, if there aren't references in your work, it means you haven't done enough reading. And remember, the more reading you do, the better your understanding of the subject will be. This means you will make better points in your essay and get higher marks. It was always explained to me when I was an undergraduate student that you could say what you like in your essay. You can tell me that you think the sky is purple, as long as you provide a reference to back up the statement that you've made. There are also some key points when you definitely have to put a reference in. If you state a fact, give a figure or statistic, give a definition, you must use a reference. Okay. So to recap, academic writing must always contain references. Make it your priority. Use academic journals, books, policies and guidelines as a starting point. Avoid Wikipedia, blogs and websites. And choose sources to support your points. Thank you for watching.